8 years ago, California voters said they were fed up with extreme politicians and negative campaigns, so they changed the way candidates get elected. No more primaries with Democrats running here and Republicans there. Everybody would run in one big jungle primary, with the top two vote getters, regardless of party affiliation, moving on to the general election. So how's it working? Well, after all the money and negative ads in the just concluded election, many folks think the great experiment has failed. Is that so? Two political observers are here to analyze: public affairs specialist Clare Venegas and journalist Will Swaim. They'll look at the governor's race too, right now on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by...
Each new community 5 Point brings to life represents a promise delivered. Great neighborhoods are more than just places to live, they are places to connect. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
Chapman University is a proud sponsor of Inside OC and community programming.
Maybe the Republican GOP apologist today.
Okay, all right. Hi, I'm Rick Reiff, and I'm talking with Clare Venegas and Will Swaim. Always good to have the two of you on. And both of you have kind of changed gigs since the last time you were on the show. Will, well, you haven't changed gigs, but you've got an additional gig. Talk about it.
Yeah, I got a podcast on National Review with my friend David Bonson, who's fairly prominent now, national commentator, lives in New York and in Newport Beach, and it's on National Review. It's called Radio Free California. You can find it wherever you pick up your podcasts. I'm not sure where that is. Perhaps you at the
Very
Smart
good. Well,
Final.
It's long overdue that you got this national exposure.
That's exactly right.
I mean,
yes.
Orange County's not big enough for you. You know, it's very hard.
Yeah, that's right.
And Clare, you have changed jobs.
I have. I'm with Kurt Pringle and Associates and having a great time.
So you are now you're now a political influencer. Is
I
that
suppose
what you do?
so. I don't know. No, we help. We support a lot of great organizations, Chalk among them, and Children and Families Commission. So
helping them navigate the whole government labyrinth.
Yep. The public landscape.
Very good. Well, great to have you on. I know you have lots of views on what's going on. So let's talk about this top two primary. This was supposed to kind of take politics out of it. We were going to vote for, moderate candidates.
Right.
Some people love moderation. They think that's a good thing. I didn't see a lot of that in this election.
No. In fact, I think it made parties become almost more relevant, right? When Trump decided he would endorse Cox, that really kind of changed the game for Republicans, and there was a clear choice for voters. You've got Gavin Newsom on the far left, you've got John Cox on the right, and all of a sudden being Republican actually started to mean something again in California. So I'm a little bit optimistic, I have to say, going into November.
Then you like this new top
I don't
two.
like the top two, but I think voters were able to kind of decipher through the negativity and the cynicism. What really happened is the fact that you've got opponents funding campaigns to support, you've got Democrats. I think Newsom had bought a bunch of advertising for John Cox, right, to boost him up.
Isn't that something?
Yes.
And
gosh,
that went
imagine
on.
That.
Now, yeah, but I mean, and so really, my theory, Will, is that it doesn't matter what kind of a system
That's
you
exactly
have,
right.
Right? You can have the old-fashioned system where Democrats ran in a primary here, Republicans ran in a primary here, and everybody said, "Oh my gosh, this is going to destroy the two-party system if you have these open primaries." But it looks like it's still the same thing. The money got in, and you had, as I said, what could be more devious than candidates running ads to help, for instance, and Newsom wasn't the only one that did this, but Newsom ran ads basically bolstering John Cox.
On Fox News.
Yes, because he wanted to keep Antonio
Villaraigosa out of the, exactly.
And it worked.
And it happened in the Rohrabacher-Baugh race, where we saw the Dems come in and start to pound on Baugh, not because they love Rohrabacher, because they want to make sure the Democrat actually got into the
and wasn't that interesting, because you had Rohrabacher and Baugh, these two longtime buddies, beating up each other. other,
Painful.
and then the Democrats jump in and say,
Or
we're going to
even-
beat up Baugh too.
Yes.
Even in South Orange County with Rocky Chavez and running against Diane Harkey in that three-way primary, you had the Dems spend a ton trying to attack Rocky for being, essentially left of left, but these are funded by Democrats,
That's right.
so they really did try
And
to
we kind of smile about it, and I think most people does it reinforce
Cynicism?
I think so.
Yeah, I think it does a little bit.
Absolutely.
But I also think, to my friends on the right, I think that maybe an important takeaway here is that in the primary, I saw a lot of Democrats splitting the vote, despite this effort on the part of the Democratic Party and major funders on the left trying to make sure their guys got in.
Well, really, because they had a lot more candidates.
They had far more candidates. This was
So-
an excess of enthusiasm, as we used to call this
Right.
during the financial collapse.
Right.
That we had so many Democrats running, representing a variety of positions that many of them kind of created space for Republicans to move in, I think.
Right.
And and it was interesting then that the national Democrats did jump in and get behind one candidate, decide who's the Republican we're going to attack,
That's right.
Right.
so that our guy
gets in.
can,
And that's
can
the
get in. And it
challenge.
seemed to work.
Right.
It seemed to work because there had been some. Isn't it interesting? Democrats months ago, or even back when Hillary beat Donald Trump in Orange
Sure.
County. Oh boy, we're going to take these
That's right.
seats. They jump
Right.
in with a lot of enthusiasm. Then as this election gets close, it's almost looking like, oh my gosh, we're not even going to get
right.
a Democrat into the top two, and they jump in. Now they do. So having said all that, Claire, what do you think? Are the Democrats feeling pretty good right now going into November when it comes to taking some of these Orange County seats?
I think they're good, but they know that the big wild card is going to be this gas tax repeal. I think that is the wild card to drive turnout in November, and I think that issue alone may attract a significant number of no party preference or independent candidates to vote for the Republican. I think the more that John Cox can ally himself with the fact that we have a disappearing middle class in California, and costs are expensive. You go to the gas pump and it's extremely expensive to fill up your tank. So I think you capitalize on that issue. I think you might see a lot of independents gravitate towards him in November.
But then we're in a moment we're going to play some postings by both Gavin Newsom. Gavin Herbert's going to be coming on a future show, but Gavin Newsom and John Cox. But clearly, Donald Trump is going to be front and center in the governor's race, and Gavin Newsom is going to tie John Cox to Donald Trump. Indeed, Donald Trump endorsed John Cox, even though John Cox has fessed up that he says he did not vote for Trump, but he wishes he had, and he got his endorsement, and that's fair game. Is that going? The presumption is you cannot win in California for governor if you're aligned with Donald Trump.
Well, I think the presumption is you cannot win for governor in California if you're a Republican at all, period, never mind Donald Trump. But I do agree that the Trump thing is perhaps problematic, or at least some of the Democrats think it is. I don't think so. I think that Bill Clinton was right when he said in the '92 campaign, it's the economy, stupid. The economy, whatever role Trump has played in the positive economy right now, the numbers are very good, and people are feeling a little bit better about Donald Trump. In California, of course, we're not really feeling the full effects of recovery, or the Trump recovery, or anybody else's recovery. And I think that in California in general, we've got the highest cost of living, we've got the highest marginal income tax rate, we've got the highest homelessness, highest poverty, highest cost of living. We have a gas tax, which is probably not going to go into actually building roads, but perhaps a high-speed rail, which will never be constructed completely. This is a devastated state, and I think that I know a lot of people that smart money says Californians will never vote for John Cox. I disagree. I think that this is
Did
a
we
big
think
good
that
win.
Trump was going to be elected? Did anybody here on this panel think Trump was going to be elected? I think it's a big wild card.
So you're using the Donald. If Donald Trump can win, anything can happen.
Anything can happen. Anything can happen.
Let me make
California.
the case that Gavin Newsom will make, that Democrats make, that Jerry Brown has been making for the last, the last 8 years or so. California's doing well. We just we now have the biggest budget surplus that we've ever had. Unemployment is low. Silicon Valley is firing on all cylinders, and that if you California the last couple of years has created more jobs than anybody.
At the top.
So
at the top.
Well, it's the economy, yeah, and the economy is going to catapult another Democrat into the governor's
Those are
mansion.
really interesting metrics, but I don't think at the level of the middle class or people who are trying to form families, younger people who are trying to really start a home here. It is almost impossible to buy a home in California right now. We have the highest cost of living in the United States. We have the highest number of homeless, as I said before. We have the highest poverty rates. These are real numbers too. And I think that was sort of the secret molecular cosmic effect in Trump's victory, because people were, at the top level, the establishment was not paying attention to that kind of pain. A Democrat could win. Gavin Newsom could win if he promised to reform the system. If they did anything on the Democratic side, if Newsom did anything to reach out to moderate and disaffected Republicans or independents.
And speaking of systems that need to be reformed, I mean, let's talk about education. And I think this is the big, pivot to
but just before we talk about education, because I think this is a good time to roll in maybe a little preview of what we're going to be seeing in the election. This is a Gavin Newsom spot that has just gone on Facebook, and I'm sure we're going to see more of it.
Okay.
I'm California Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom. On June 5th, California voters will face a choice in the race for governor. We could stand up to Donald Trump, or we can let his protege, John Cox, continue his assault on our values. Taking a page from the Trump playbook, John Cox spews the same hateful rhetoric as his role model, claiming that equal rights will open the floodgates to bestiality, pledging to veto hate crimes legislation, and calling new gun laws a waste of time. In California, we stand for equality, we stand for justice, and we stand up for the safety of our diverse communities. That's why it's more important than ever that we make our voices heard this June 5th and vote. Find out where and how to vote by visiting gavinnewsom.com/vote. Let's reject John Cox and Donald Trump's cynical attempts to take our state backwards and make sure California leads the nation. Resistance with results.
Resistance with results. I think we're going to be, if not hearing that slogan, we're certainly that theme of John Cox, Donald Trump, not California. He is not the California candidate.
Well, it's almost like let's just cover these massive problems under a rug. Let's just sweep it under a rug, right? Results, I mean, we've got like 1 in 5 people in poverty in California.
Yeah, but you also have...
You've got a broken educational system with failing schools, worse than some of the southern states in our... I mean, it's just, it's what John Cox does need to do.
But I think that, and those are all compelling policy arguments. Isn't the undercurrent of what Gavin Newsom's doing? John Cox is not one of us. He is not.
That is
he
definitely
is not
yes.
reflective
It's
of California.
yeah.
Plus, I'm sure we're going to hear all about the fact that until the last few years he was a Chicagoan, and but he doesn't represent the values of California.
Well, that's an argument that will resonate with a certain percentage of the voters, and I think a much larger percentage of the voters will sort of take a look at the price of energy, the price of housing, the fact that there are homeless people living on the streets. If I'm John Cox, I'm going to bang the drum about those failures. The failures we have. No, seriously, buddy. This is about income inequality. It is a class war, and the class war is being carried out by government unions in California, led now by Gavin Newsom, against middle class and working class people. If you doubt that, go to any inner city school, go look at the delivery of services, and go look at the huge price tag for and unfunded payments to government pensions.
Well, in fact,
problem.
since you mentioned it, let's hear John Cox himself addressing those things. So we just saw Gavin and his likely line of attack in this coming election. And in his victory speech that he recently gave, John Cox sounded some themes that I'm sure we're going to be hearing from him.
Mr. Newsom made it clear that he wanted to run against me instead of another Democrat. Well, as I told him in San Jose at the debate, be careful, Mr. Newsom, be careful for what you wish for. Mr. Newsom and his corrupt cronies they did a bunch of ads touting their opposition to the president. Well, let's send him the very first message and that is it wasn't Donald Trump who made California the highest tax state in the country. It was Gavin Newsom and the Democrats. It wasn't President Trump who gave us a $52 billion gas tax increase without any reform of Caltrans, one of the most wasteful and inefficient agencies in the country. It wasn't Donald Trump who gave us that gas tax. It was Gavin Newsom, and we're going to repeal that tax in November.
Okay, so Will, did you write that for him?
No, I think that anybody who's paying attention could have written that for him. If I'm John Cox, I think in addition to those really, I think, pointed observations, what you want to ask Californians is, here are images of San Francisco homelessness, of the high cost of living, of the radical disparities. The income inequality in San Francisco is worse than it is just about anywhere else in the country.
Right.
I would show those images on billboards and say, do you want for California what Gavin Newsom has done to San Francisco? I think the answer is no.
Right, and I think it just, to Will's point, this income inequality and income disparity in California, we're living in two states, along the coast and inland, everyone else, right? And so that's the disparity that that he needs to point out. I think there is this untapped potential with independent voters who feel the pain every day when they go fill up their cars and they go pay their taxes, and suddenly their friends at church and school are moving out of state because they realize the income, it's just so much more affordable in other states. And here in California, we're trudging along, barely making ends meet. And I think that's the message that John Cox has to hit home with those independent voters who don't want that San Francisco ultra-liberal brand, but maybe want that check on this very far-left, Democratic legislature.
It will be interesting to see, but that argument about the elite Bay Area, Northern Californians, some people thought that perhaps that would help either Antonio Villaraigosa or John Chung, two Los Angeles politicians who were running for governor. And they really abysmal, single digits.
Right.
What happened? Especially Antonio Villaraigosa got a lot of money. There were a lot of Republicans who were saying, well, we don't really think a Republican can win. Maybe Antonio's the guy.
I know, and I was one of them.
Really?
It's such a, big confession, I did vote for Antonio in the primary because I thought we would have, in November, a choice between the lesser of two evils. I thought it would be Gavin Newsom and Antonio. And frankly, on the charter school issue alone, I think Antonio is obviously more in line with what Republicans would like to see in terms of educational reform. But yeah, I was one of those. And now seeing kind of the failure of that effort, I think the challenge is that they just, the top level money, the money that was spent, was misdirected. I think you had a lot of Antonio's ads were attacking Newsom. That should have already been a foregone conclusion. We knew Gavin was going to make it past the primary. I think what their efforts should have been more towards was voter turnout, obviously Latino turnout. I read a statistic that that Antonio got more votes as a percentage of the statewide population than he did in LA County alone. And I think a couple of other factors hurt him. The fact that he's been out of office for a few years, name ID isn't quite, and the enthusiasm factor. And, in the Bay Area, Newsom has a lot of enthusiasm built up. He's a sitting lieutenant governor. And I think those were all factors that unfortunately didn't play well with Antonio. I think the Latino voter turnout in LA was not what they thought it would be. So.
I think the comments on, and that could be a criticism, as you say, of the campaign, not turning out people. And I find those, but in some ways, the misdirected money, that's the one that I wonder about. I would say that would be more significant if it were close and there was a 3 or 4 point difference. But the fact that, Antonio Villaraigosa did so poorly, Will, do you have any ideas? And then John Chung never got any traction at all. And here, he could have been in a position to, I'm the guy that understands how to balance a budget. I've been the controller and the treasurer and all this. And, nothing.
I think
Why
name
is that?
I think name ID is crucial. There's no question, and I think the Trump effect among the Democratic base is clearly in Gavin's favor rather than Antonio's. Also, there's lots of polling data that shows that Latinos, especially in LA, not really enthusiastic about the former mayor. This was a huge shock, I think, to Antonio Villaraigosa himself.
Right.
So the question is, will they be enthusiastic for Gavin in November?
I don't think so. I think that's where Republicans and, frankly, John Cox has a huge opportunity, is with the Latino voters who are much more socially conservative than someone like a Newsom in the far left. You think about schools, and the big debate right now in my circles among moms are, the sex ed curriculum that's going on in our public schools. And that's something that's being considered in terms of being reformed. But the fact that parents don't have the opportunity to opt their children out of some of the content that's being published, those are the things that I think will help drive that conservative, in quotes, Latino voter base. Parents who care about their kids getting into better schools. Those are the issues, the bread and butter issues, that I think Cox has to capitalize on. Yes, I think the Trump factor does, not bode well for Cox, for Cox in general, statewide. But I think with certain segments of the population, it will.
So let's talk a little bit about what might be at stake. You've alluded to some things, but what really difference does it make if this guy wins or that guy wins? When it comes to education and education reform, charter schools, the charter school backers in California, the big funders, put all their eggs in Antonio Villaraigosa's basket, something like $23 million. And Antonio went down in flames. Gavin got $1 million plus as was expected to do, and he'll get much more in the general election from the teachers' unions. The teachers' unions and the charter school advocates are on much different sides when it comes to the whole issue of what we should be doing about education. Is this real bad, or what, Claire, I know you've been involved in the charter school efforts. What are you going to do in the general now?
That's, I think, the biggest wild card, is where is all this outside money that supported Antonio going to go? And I think they may be reluctant to put that money with a Republican in California, right at the top of the ticket.
Well, I think because you're saying the charter school movement is dominated by Democrats who are disaffected from the public education system as it is.
And would they really put their money behind a Republican who may not, by all measures, has a long shot at winning? Will they play at the local level? I think that's a more, I'd be interested to see if some of that money does go down to some of these larger local school districts where they can actually make significant policy changes by electing a couple of board members here, a couple of board members there.
It will be interesting because, for instance, in LAUSD, charter school forces now control the board of LAUSD, and things are happening there. And that was entirely Democrats. And that, it's kind of the critics of the charter school movement keep saying, billionaire business. Yes, a billionaire Democrat, Eli Broad, who hates Donald Trump, and he was a funder. So now these same people, and let's face it, it's smart. If you're going to reform the education in California, you align yourself with the winning side, which is the Democrats.
Well, I think that's
so what do they do now? Do they play nice with Gavin? Do they decide, Gavin, we'll sit it out, just, don't come down on us too hard?
Well, we've got the Marshall Tuck superintendent of schools race, which is an opportunity because Marshall had only performed his union-backed opponent by 3 points. So I think that's probably a safe bet for some of that money. But they know that you really can't drive education policy from that seat.
I was going to say, that is one of the least potent seats in the entire state.
You can't really drive policy.
If you're on witness protection, they can put you in the
superintendent. What's interesting.
Finally, another issue, Gavin has come out for single-payer health care. Now, do you think he's really serious about that? Because Gavin's also a good politician. And we talked about this jungle primary and everything, and certainly he ran to the left. He's now in a general. Do you think he might send out some signals, and can he do that?
Yeah, that utterly capable, Gavin Newsom is, of saying one thing to one audience and something totally different to another audience. The left loves to talk about how Trump, fact-free, he lives in the post-truth environment. So does Gavin Newsom. He's just more sophisticated, I think, about it from most Californians' perspective. So yes, he will tell people, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I'm going to be the resistance with results. I'm going to have single-payer health care because Trump doesn't want it, but we're going to do it in a way that's financially sound.
Yeah,
and
because and the big concern is that right now there's every projection is that it would cost so much.
Oh, $400 billion.
What would really stop him from trying? Right? Other than,
he wants to succeed.
You've got
and
an
he's on the premise he
legislature.
wants to succeed, and he's a smart guy.
But then he can blame any of that failure on Trump. They cut federal dollars to fund Medicaid. You've got, I wouldn't be surprised if he tries it. If he wins, especially by the margin that he wins by.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is probably the issue that will attract a lot of the base, and I think the sound middle will find this disturbing.
Folks, we will revisit this issue. It's a long way to November. Thanks so much for your insights. That's it for now. Thanks again to my guests, Clare, Venegas, and Will Swaim. You can watch this show and past shows at pbssocal.org or rickreif.com, and you can catch our shows and our open mic chatter. This should be a good one on YouTube, and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by
Each new community 5 Point brings to life represents a promise delivered. Great neighborhoods are more than just places to live, they are places to connect. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
All your life, people talk about what's best for you. But to most people, it's just that. Talk. Unless you're with MemorialCare, a healthcare system devoted to one important thing: what's best for you.